The man being dragged down the aircraft aisle was worth $8.4 billion. Blood streamed from his temple where his head had met the armrest of seat 1C 3 minutes earlier. His wrists, locked in metal handcuffs tightened 2 clicks past regulation, had already begun to swell. The hoodie he wore, black Loro Piana cashmere that cost $2,800 but looked like something from Target, rode up his back as Port Authority Officer Darius Tremaine Morrison hauled him across carpet that scraped skin raw. 127 passengers held up phones. The red recording lights blinked like tiny accusatory stars. Isaiah Thaddeus Blackwell owned the plane. The crew, betting his credit card was stolen, had 14 minutes left in their careers. Rewind. 36 hours earlier. March 13th, 2026. 7 in the morning. Bedford-Stuyvesant, Brooklyn. The brownstone on Hancock Street had belonged to Isaiah's grandmother before she passed in 2019. He kept it, not as an investment property or a tax write-off, but because the kitchen still smelled like her. Cinnamon, coffee, and something indefinable that meant home. He stood at the stove now, wooden spoon in hand, stirring steel-cut oats in a pot that had seen 3 decades of breakfasts. His daughter Zara sat at the table, 6 years old, braids tied with purple ribbons, swinging legs that didn't quite reach the floor. The oatmeal bubbled. Isaiah added a pinch of salt the way his grandmother taught him. Zara was drawing on construction paper with crayons that had seen better days. She preferred the worn-down nubs to new ones. Something about the way they moved across the page felt right to her. She'd explained once with the certainty only small children possess. Isaiah ladled oatmeal into 2 bowls, added brown sugar, sliced banana, a drizzle of honey, placed one in front of Zara. She looked up, smiled the gap-toothed grin that made everything else in the world feel secondary. Footsteps on the stairs. Naomi appeared in the doorway, already dressed for the day in a charcoal pantsuit that meant business. Dr. Naomi Simone Blackwell, formerly Assistant United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York, currently of counsel at a firm that paid her more than the government ever could but gave her less satisfaction. She'd left the prosecutor's office 2 years ago when Zara started kindergarten. Work-life balance, she called it. Isaiah knew the truth. She'd seen too many families destroyed by a system that ground people down, regardless of guilt or innocence, and she needed distance before the weight of it broke something inside her that couldn't be repaired. Naomi poured coffee into a thermos. Isaiah watched her move through the kitchen with the efficiency of someone who'd memorized every cabinet, every drawer. 17 years together, married for 12. Some mornings he still couldn't believe she'd said yes. Zara finished her oatmeal in record time, a personal best that deserved acknowledgement. Isaiah made a mental note to tell her later. Small victories mattered. His own father had never noticed the small things, too busy working 3 jobs to keep the lights on in their apartment in Brownsville. Isaiah remembered what it felt like to be invisible in your own home. He refused to let Zara feel that. 8:15. Time to leave. Isaiah grabbed the keys to the Honda Accord from the hook by the door. Naomi raised an eyebrow. Why not take the Maybach? The question hung in the air between them. In the garage 2 blocks away sat a fleet that would make a car enthusiast weep. The Maybach S-Class, the Bentley Continental GT, the vintage Porsche 911 that Isaiah had restored himself over 2 years. Because he needed something to do with his hands that didn't involve spreadsheets and board meetings. But the Honda was what he drove most days. A 2018 model with 140,000 miles, a dent in the rear bumper from a shopping cart incident at Costco, and a lingering smell of French fries that no amount of air freshener could fully eliminate. Same reason I wear this. Isaiah gestured to the hoodie. Black, simple, expensive in ways that didn't announce themselves. People showed their true faces when they thought you couldn't touch them. He'd learned that at 19, standing in Bloomingdale's with security guards accusing him of shoplifting. He'd been trying on a suit for a job interview, a suit he planned to buy, but the guard saw a black teenager in sneakers and decided he was stealing. NYPD arrived. Handcuffs. Against the wall in front of shoppers who averted their eyes or pulled out phones to film what they assumed was justice being served. 20 minutes later, when the manager finally checked the security footage and saw Isaiah had walked in through the front door carrying nothing and touched nothing except the suit he'd asked to try on, the officers removed the cuffs without apology. One of them, a white guy with a mustache that belonged in a 70s cop show, told him he should be more careful about how he presented himself. As if the problem was Isaiah's appearance and not the assumption that his skin meant criminality. That moment had carved something permanent into his understanding of the world. Humiliation had a texture. It felt like metal cutting into wrists. It tasted like copper fear in the back of your throat, and it taught you that dignity was not a guarantee but a fight you had to win every single day. Naomi knew the story. She nodded, said nothing more. Zara climbed into the back seat of the Honda, buckled herself in with the determination of someone who'd been told 1,000 times that seatbelts weren't optional. Isaiah drove through Brooklyn streets still waking up, past bodegas opening their gates, past the barbershop where he'd gotten his hair cut since he was 7, past the church where his grandmother's funeral had filled every pew and spilled out onto the sidewalk. Brooklyn Friends School sat on Pearl Street in a building that tried very hard to look welcoming and progressive and worth the $40,000 a year tuition. Isaiah pulled up to the drop-off circle. Zara kissed his cheek, grabbed her backpack, and ran toward the entrance where her best friend Mia was already waiting. The two girls collided in a hug that suggested they hadn't seen each other in years, rather than since yesterday afternoon. Isaiah watched until Zara disappeared through the doors. Then he sat in the car for another 3 minutes, letting the engine idle, watching other parents drop off their children. Most arrived in vehicles that matched the tuition. Range Rovers, Teslas, one Rolls-Royce Cullinan that probably cost more than the average American earned in 4 years. The parents wore athleisure that had never seen actual athletic activity or business casual that screamed finance or law or medicine. They belonged here, or at least they looked like they belonged here, which was often the same thing. Isaiah belonged here too. He'd written the check for Zara's tuition without blinking, but he knew that if he showed up in the Maybach, wearing the Tom Ford suits that hung in his closet, people would treat him differently. They'd assume he was an athlete or an entertainer, something that confirmed their pre-existing narratives about how black men acquired wealth. And when they discovered he ran Blackwell Aviation Holdings, a private equity firm that owned 17 companies across 4 countries and managed assets worth north of $40 billion, they'd be surprised. That surprise would reveal something about their assumptions. And Isaiah was tired of being the one who had to endure other people's revelations about their own prejudice. So he drove the Honda, wore the hoodie, let people underestimate him, and when the moment came, and the moment always came, he made sure the lesson landed hard enough to leave a mark. 9:30, back in the brownstone. Naomi had left for the office an hour ago. Isaiah sat at the kitchen table with his laptop open, reviewing the final documents for the Skyward Airlines acquisition. The deal had closed on March 10th, 4 days ago. 100% controlling interest, $2.8 billion. The lawyers at Sullivan and Cromwell had spent 6 months on due diligence. The financing had been structured through a combination of cash reserves and debt that would make most CFOs nervous, but that Isaiah knew he could service without breaking a sweat. Skyward was profitable, well-positioned in the transatlantic market, and had a brand that consumers trusted. What the lawyers hadn't found, because they weren't looking for it and because it didn't show up in financial statements, was the rot in the corporate culture. Isaiah had heard rumors, whispers at industry conferences, a few articles in trade publications that danced around accusations without making them explicit. Passenger complaints that seemed to follow a pattern if you knew how to look for patterns. But rumors weren't proof, and Isaiah, for all his instincts, hadn't understood the depth of the problem until he started digging into the HR files after the acquisition closed. 47 discrimination complaints filed between 2019 and 2026, all involving passengers of color, all dismissed by the VP of Operations, a man named Jonathan Whitfield Lancaster, who'd been with Skyward for 15 years and had apparently decided that crew judgment was infallible and passenger accusations were inherently suspect. The complaints told stories that varied in details but shared a common structure. Tickets questioned, additional verification demanded. Passengers treated as presumptive frauds until they could prove otherwise. And in several cases, passengers removed from aircraft because crew members decided they didn't belong. Isaiah had hired Kroll to conduct a forensic investigation. They delivered their preliminary report yesterday. 19 complaints involved the same flight attendant, a woman named Vanessa Cordelia Whitmore. 11 involved the same captain, Randall Pierce Harrington. The others were spread across different crew members, but the pattern was unmistakable. Skyward had a systemic problem, and Jonathan Lancaster had systematically protected the people creating that problem. Isaiah closed the laptop. He had a flight to London tomorrow morning, a board meeting with Sir Theodore Ashford, the chairman who'd founded Skyward 30 years ago and who'd agreed to stay on during the transition. Theodore was a good man. Isaiah liked him. But Theodore had been asleep at the wheel, or perhaps more accurately, he'd been so focused on the numbers that he'd stopped paying attention to the humans behind them. That was about to change. March 14th, 6:45 in the morning. JFK Airport, Terminal 5. The terminal that housed Skyward Airlines and a handful of international carriers designed with soaring ceilings and glass walls that let in enough natural light to make you forget you were in an airport. Isaiah, Naomi, and Zara walked through the main concourse toward security. Zara held her stuffed rabbit by one ear. The rabbit's name was Clover. She'd had Clover since she was 2. The rabbit had been to more places than most adults, including Paris, Tokyo, and a beach in Turks and Caicos where Zara had accidentally left Clover near the water and Isaiah had run back to retrieve her before the tide came in. TSA pre-check line. The line that was supposed to be faster, easier, less invasive. The line you paid for the privilege of using. Isaiah had global entry, which included pre-check, and he'd added Naomi and Zara to his account. They walked toward the scanner where a TSA agent stood checking boarding passes and IDs. The agent was a white man in his 50s, thick through the middle, with the kind of mustache that suggested he'd been hired in the 80s and never updated his look. His name tag said Henderson. He took Isaiah's ID and boarding pass, glanced at them, then looked up at Isaiah. Something shifted in his expression. Not overt, just a subtle tightening around the eyes. A fractional pause that lasted a beat too long. "Sir, I need you to step aside for additional screening." Isaiah felt Naomi tense beside him. Zara, oblivious, was examining Clover's ear, which had developed a small tear that would need repair soon. "This is the pre-check line. We've already been vetted." Henderson's jaw set. "It's a random selection, sir. Step aside, please." There was nothing random about it. Isaiah knew that. Naomi knew that. But arguing with a TSA agent was a losing game that would only make things worse. Isaiah stepped aside. Henderson waved the white family behind them through without a second glance. The family. Father in Patagonia vest, mother in Lululemon. 2 children clutching iPads sailed through the scanner and disappeared toward their gate. A second TSA agent appeared. Younger, Latino, name tag, Rodriguez. He approached with a tray of swabs and a handheld device that looked like it belonged in a science fiction movie. "Sir, I'm going to swab your bag for explosive residue." Isaiah set his duffel on the table. Rodriguez swabbed the handles, the zipper, The bottom. Each swab went into the machine. Each time the machine beeped negative. Rodriguez swabbed again. Same result. 3 times total. Isaiah counted. Naomi's hand found his, squeezed once. A silent message. Stay calm. Don't give them a reason. Sir, I need you to remove your shoes and belt. Isaiah complied. Place the shoes, vintage Air Jordan ones that he'd bought at a consignment shop in Soho because sometimes nostalgia was worth the price, into a bin. Placed the belt beside them. Stood for the pat-down that came next. Rodriguez's hands moved across his chest, his back, his legs, with the mechanical efficiency of someone who'd done this 10,000 times and had stopped thinking of the people being searched as people. The whole process took 18 minutes. 18 minutes during which the white family that had been behind them in line was probably already sipping coffee at their gate. 18 minutes during which Zara asked twice why they had to stop, and Naomi deflected with practiced skill, turning it into a game about patience and observation. When Henderson finally cleared them, he did so without apology or acknowledgement that anything unusual had occurred. Isaiah collected his shoes, his belt, his bag, walked through the scanner that beeped for everyone regardless of skin color, headed toward the gates with Naomi and Zara. Naomi leaned close, voice low. You okay? Isaiah nodded, but he wasn't, because this was the 3rd time this morning, the 3rd microaggression before 7:30, and the day was just beginning. 7:15, Gate 12, Skyward Airlines. The gate was surprisingly empty for an international flight. Isaiah approached the podium where a gate agent was scanning boarding passes. The agent was a black woman in her 30s, hair pulled back in a neat bun, Skyward uniform pressed and perfect. Her name tag said Angela Price. She looked up as Isaiah approached, saw him, and something flickered across her face. Recognition, maybe, or suspicion, hard to tell. Isaiah handed her his phone with the digital boarding pass displayed. The screen showed Seat 1A, First Class, Flight 237 to London Heathrow. Angela scanned the barcode. The scanner beeped. Not the pleasant chime that meant everything was fine. A sharp, angry beep, the sound of rejection. Angela frowned. Tried again. Same beep. Sir, this isn't reading correctly. Are you sure this is your ticket? The question landed like a slap. Isaiah kept his voice level. Yes, I purchased it Tuesday through your app. Angela turned the phone, examined the screen as if Isaiah might have photoshopped a boarding pass in his kitchen that morning. Let me verify with my supervisor. She walked away, disappeared into the jetway. Isaiah stood at the podium with Naomi and Zara, aware that other passengers were beginning to arrive, beginning to form a line behind them. 4 minutes passed. 5. Naomi checked her watch. Zara shifted from foot to foot, a sign she was getting restless. Angela returned with a white woman in her 40s, gray blazer over her uniform, name tag identifying her as Caroline Winters, supervisor. Caroline took Isaiah's phone, examined the boarding pass with the kind of scrutiny usually reserved for suspicious packages. Mr. Blackwell, this shows Seat 1A. That's our signature suite. Isaiah waited. Naomi's hand found his again. How did you purchase this ticket? Through the app, as I already explained to your agent. Caroline's eyes narrowed just slightly. Can I see your payment method? Naomi stepped forward. Her voice carried the steel that had made her effective in federal court. Why? Caroline didn't look at her. Standard verification for high-value tickets. It's not standard. You didn't ask that, family. Naomi pointed to the white couple now in line behind them, both in business casual, carry-ons that screamed frequent flyer. Caroline's smile didn't reach her eyes. Ma'am, I'm just doing my job. Isaiah pulled up the confirmation email on his phone, showed Caroline the Skyward logo, the booking reference, the charge to his American Express Centurion card. Caroline examined it all with the enthusiasm of someone who'd been told to find a problem and was determined to find one. Finally, she handed the phone back. Everything appears to be in order. You're cleared to board. She said it as if she were doing Isaiah a favor rather than allowing him to use the ticket he'd paid for. Angela scanned the boarding pass again. This time, the scanner accepted it, the pleasant chime. Isaiah, Naomi, and Zara walked toward the jetway. Behind them, Caroline's voice carried, "Have a good flight, Mr. Blackwell." The words sounded pleasant. The tone underneath them was not. 7:30. Skyward Airlines first-class lounge. The lounge occupied prime real estate on the concourse. Glass walls offering views of the tarmac where planes taxied and departed with the regularity of a well-run machine. Inside, the lounge looked like what happened when an interior designer was given an unlimited budget and instructions to make everything feel expensive. Leather chairs, marble countertops, a buffet spread that included smoked salmon, fresh fruit, pastries that would make a French baker weep, and a coffee machine that probably cost more than most people's cars. Isaiah approached the reception desk. The receptionist was a white man in his 20s, blonde hair styled with product, teeth too white to be natural. His name tag said Christopher. "May I help you?" Isaiah showed his boarding pass on his phone. Christopher glanced at it, then looked up at Isaiah, then back at the phone. "I'm sorry, sir. This lounge is for first-class passengers only." "I am first class. Seat 1A. Christopher's smile was patient in the way that suggested he dealt with people trying to sneak into the lounge multiple times per day. "Let me check our access list." He turned to his computer, typed, frowned, picked up the phone and called someone. Isaiah couldn't hear the conversation, but he watched Christopher's body language, the slight defensiveness, the way his shoulders hunched. The call lasted 3 minutes. Christopher hung up and turned back to Isaiah with a smile that had been freshly applied like a coat of paint over annoyance. "Mr. Blackwell, my apologies. There was a system glitch. Please come in. Welcome to the Skyward Lounge." The whole interaction had taken 8 minutes. 8 minutes of standing at a reception desk being treated like someone who didn't belong while other passengers, all white, all well-dressed in ways that matched the lounge's aesthetic, walked past and were waved through without question. Isaiah walked into the lounge, found a quiet corner near the windows, sat down in a leather chair that was more comfortable than his couch at home. Naomi settled beside him. Zara climbed into the chair between them, pulled Clover onto her lap, and started telling the rabbit about the planes they could see outside. Naomi's voice was quiet, meant only for Isaiah. "That's 3 times this morning." Isaiah nodded. "TSA, gate, lounge, 3 times before 8 in the morning that he'd been treated as suspect, questioned, forced to prove he had a right to be in spaces he'd paid to access. 3 times he'd kept his voice calm, his body language non-threatening, his responses polite, because anything else would give them the excuse they were looking for. "Want to say something?" Isaiah watched a Boeing 777 push back from its gate, the ground crew moving with choreographed precision, the plane that would take them to London. His plane, technically, though the crew loading passengers right now didn't know that. Theodore Ashford had sent the memo announcing the acquisition on March 10th, 4 days ago. Global distribution. Every employee with an email address had received it, but emails were easy to ignore, easy to scroll past without reading, hit with a template response that said, "Acknowledged," without actually acknowledging anything. Not yet. Let's see how deep this goes. Because Isaiah had a feeling, the kind of feeling you developed after years of watching people reveal themselves. The gate agent's suspicion, the supervisor's interrogation, the lounge receptionist's disbelief. These weren't isolated incidents. They were symptoms of something larger, something systematic. And if Isaiah was right about what that something was, then the next 2 hours were going to be very educational for everyone involved. 8:05. Boarding began. Isaiah, Naomi, and Zara walked down the jetway, that strange tunnel between terminal and aircraft that always felt too bright and too warm. The door to the plane stood open. Just inside, a flight attendant waited. White woman, late 40s, blonde hair pulled back severely, uniform immaculate, smile fixed in place like it had been stapled there. Her name tag identified her as Vanessa Whitmore, lead flight attendant. Vanessa's eyes tracked the Blackwell family as they boarded. Isaiah saw it. The quick assessment. The way her gaze moved from his sneakers to his joggers to his hoodie. The almost imperceptible head shake she gave to the younger flight attendant standing beside her, a Latina woman whose name tag said Rosa. Vanessa whispered something to Rosa, too quiet for Isaiah to hear, but he saw Rosa's reaction. The way her eyebrows rose, the glance she threw at Isaiah's back as the family moved into the first-class cabin. Seat 1A, the signature suite. A private cocoon of luxury with a door that closed, a seat that converted to a fully flat bed, a personal entertainment system with a screen the size of a small television, and enough amenities to make a five-star hotel jealous. Isaiah had flown first class hundreds of times. He knew what to expect, but he also knew that expectation and delivery were not always the same thing, especially when the person delivering the service had already decided you didn't deserve it. He stowed his bag in the overhead compartment, settled into 1A. Naomi took 1K across the aisle. Zara took 2A directly behind Isaiah, already pulling out her coloring book and crayons. 812. More passengers boarded. Business class first, then premium economy, then the masses in the back who'd paid regular fares and would spend the next 7 hours in seats designed by someone who'd clearly never flown in one. Isaiah watched the stream of people through the gap between seats. Executives, families, a few solo travelers who looked like they were flying for work and would spend the entire flight typing on laptops balanced on tray tables. Then she appeared. Patricia Evangeline Carrington Ross. Isaiah didn't know her name yet, but he would soon. She was white, early 50s, with the kind of blonde hair that came from a salon where appointments started at $300 and the kind of Hermes scarf that cost more than most people's monthly rent. She wore yoga pants that had never seen actual yoga and carried a Birkin bag that was almost certainly genuine and probably cost more than a used car. Patricia stopped at row 1, looked at Isaiah sitting in 1A, looked at her boarding pass, looked back at Isaiah. Her face cycled through confusion, then annoyance, then something that looked like offense. She turned and raised her hand to get Vanessa's attention. Vanessa materialized instantly, as if she'd been waiting for this exact moment. Patricia's voice carried loud enough for the first 4 rows to hear. "Excuse me, there's been a mistake." Vanessa's smile was sympathetic, conspirator to conspirator. "How can I help you, Mrs. Carrington Ross?" First name basis. Of course they knew each other. Patricia was clearly a frequent flyer, probably had status that came with priority boarding and upgrades and all the small privileges that made people feel important. "I always sit in 1A, for my lower back, and there's someone in my seat." She didn't look at Isaiah when she said someone, as if he were a piece of misplaced luggage rather than a person. Vanessa's gaze moved to Isaiah. Something hardened in her expression. "Of course, Mrs. Carrington Ross. Let me handle this." Vanessa approached. Her smile, which had been genuine for Patricia, became customer service plastic for Isaiah. "Good morning, Mr. Blackwell. May I see your boarding pass once more?" Isaiah pulled out his phone, showed the boarding pass for the 3rd time that morning. Vanessa examined it with the thoroughness of an art expert evaluating a potential forgery. This doesn't match our system." It scanned at the gate. Vanessa's smile didn't waver. "Sometimes fraudulent passes scan initially but flag later in our system. It's a security feature." Naomi unbuckled her seatbelt and leaned across the aisle. Her voice carried the warning edge that anyone who'd faced her in court would recognize. "Fraudulent? We paid $47,000 for these 3 seats." Vanessa turned to Naomi, the smile still in place but the eyes now calculating. "I'm sure it's a misunderstanding, ma'am, but protocol requires verification for high-value transactions. The same line Caroline had used at the gate. Isaiah wondered if they'd workshopped it, refined it, turned it into the official excuse for targeting passengers who didn't fit their demographic expectations. Patricia inserted herself into the conversation, speaking to Vanessa as if Isaiah and Naomi weren't there. I'm Diamond Medallion, 2 million miles. I always sit in 1A because of my lower back condition. This is unacceptable. Vanessa nodded with the sympathy of one affluent white woman validating another. I completely understand, Mrs. Carrington Ross. I apologize for this delay. Then she turned to Isaiah. The smile had vanished. Sir, would you mind moving to economy while I sort this out? The question was phrased politely. The tone underneath was not a question at all. It was an instruction. Move, know your place, don't make trouble. Isaiah looked at Vanessa, then at Patricia, then back at Vanessa. He could feel Naomi's tension across the aisle, could hear Zara's coloring pause as she picked up on the adult stress saturating the cabin. I would mind. I'm not moving. 3 words, polite, firm, final. Vanessa's jaw tightened. A crack appeared in the professional facade. Rosa, the younger flight attendant, hovered nearby, watching with the expression of someone who knew something was about to go very wrong but didn't have the authority or courage to intervene. Patricia's voice rose, indignant. This is ridiculous. I have a medical condition. I need that seat. Naomi's response was ice. Then you should have booked it before someone else did. Vanessa held up a hand, attempting to regain control of the situation. Let me check with the captain. Please, everyone remain calm. She disappeared toward the cockpit. Patricia remained standing in the aisle, blocking the boarding process, arms crossed, radiating the kind of entitled fury that came from a lifetime of getting exactly what she wanted, exactly when she wanted it. Isaiah settled back into his seat. He could have de-escalated, could have moved to economy, taken the path of least resistance, avoided the confrontation. But that would have taught Zara the wrong lesson. It would have taught her that when people treated you as less than, you should accept it, should make yourself smaller to make them comfortable, should apologize for taking up space you had every right to occupy. No, this moment was a test, and Isaiah was going to make sure everyone involved understood the results. Vanessa returned with the captain in tow. Captain Randall Pierce Harrington. Late 50s, gray hair swept back, Navy uniform from decades past, now replaced by civilian pilot stripes, but the military bearing still evident in his posture. He carried himself with the confidence of someone who'd spent 35 years in cockpits and believed that authority was his by divine right. Harrington didn't ask for context, didn't examine Isaiah's boarding pass, didn't investigate the competing claims. He looked at Isaiah, looked at Patricia, and made his decision in the time it took most people to blink. Sir, you need to leave my aircraft. My aircraft, as if he owned it. As if Skyward Airlines was a kingdom and he was its monarch. Isaiah kept his voice level, but something in his tone sharpened. Your aircraft? This is Skyward Airlines Boeing 777-300ER. Registration number November 247 Sierra Alpha. You're employed as pilot in command, but you don't own it. Harrington's face flushed. He wasn't used to being corrected, especially not by passengers who looked like Isaiah. Don't get smart with me. On my aircraft, I'm the law. My crew says you're a problem, that's enough. Isaiah could see where this was going. Could see it with the clarity of someone who'd lived through variations of this scene too many times. The crew had decided he was a problem. The captain had backed the crew without investigation, and now the machinery of removal was activating, that terrible bureaucratic momentum that would end with security and handcuffs and humiliation. Call Theodore Ashford, chairman of the board. He'll verify my ticket. Harrington laughed, actual laughter. The kind that said he thought Isaiah was delusional. I don't bother the chairman for ticketing disputes. You have 30 seconds to gather your things and leave voluntarily, or I'm calling Port Authority. Isaiah glanced at Naomi. She gave the smallest nod. We're with you. Whatever happens next, we're with you. Then Isaiah spoke the words that would seal everyone's fate. Captain, you're making a mistake. Harrington's face went from flushed to crimson. He leaned forward, voice dropping to a register that was meant to intimidate. The only mistake here is you thinking you belong in first class. Now move. And there it was, not explicit enough to be prosecutable on its own, but clear enough that everyone who heard it understood exactly what Harrington meant. Vanessa stood behind him, arms crossed, vindicated. Patricia watched with satisfaction. Rosa looked at the floor. Isaiah didn't move. Harrington pulled a phone from his pocket, pressed a button. When he spoke, his voice carried through the cabin. This is Captain Harrington on Skyward 237. I need Port Authority at Gate 12. Immediately, we have a disruptive passenger refusing to deplane. He hung up. Looked at Isaiah with something that might have been pity if it weren't wrapped in contempt. You had your chance. The passengers in rows 2 through 4 had their phones out now, recording. One of them, a young black man in seat 2F with expensive headphones around his neck and a camera bag at his feet, had his phone up and aimed. Isaiah would later learn his name was Malik Terrence Washington. YouTuber, 8.2 million subscribers. Currently live streaming to an audience that was growing by the second as viewers shared the link across social media. Vanessa leaned close to Rosa, voice pitched just loud enough for rows 1 through 4 to hear. They probably got someone's credit card number off the dark web. That's what people like them do anyway. The cabin went silent. Not the comfortable silence of people minding their own business, but the shocked silence of witnessing something that couldn't be unsaid. Patricia nodded in agreement. Rosa's eyes went wide. Malik's camera zoomed in on Vanessa's face, capturing the moment for posterity. Isaiah stood slowly, not aggressive, not threatening, just rising to his full height, which was considerable. He looked at Vanessa, then at Harrington, then at Patricia. What did you just say? Vanessa's face went pale. She realized, perhaps for the first time, that she'd crossed a line. But she was committed now. Couldn't back down without losing face in front of Patricia, in front of the captain, in front of the other crew members who were watching to see if their lead attendant would hold firm. Sir, sit down or I'm calling security myself. Harrington stepped forward, positioning himself between Isaiah and Vanessa, as if Isaiah posed a physical threat. On my aircraft, I am the law, and I say you leave now. Patricia inserted herself again, speaking to no one in particular but making sure everyone heard. Thank God. I was worried I'd have to sit near them for 7 hours. Them, not him, not the family. Them, the pronoun doing the work that explicit slurs once did, carrying the same weight with plausible deniability. Naomi was out of her seat now, standing in the aisle, phone in hand, filming everything. Zara had stopped coloring. She sat in 2A, clutching Clover, eyes wide with the kind of fear that children feel when they don't understand why adults are being cruel but know that something is terribly wrong. Isaiah looked at Harrington. He'd given them chances, multiple chances, at TSA, at the gate, at the lounge, now here. Every time he'd stayed calm, stayed polite, stayed reasonable. And every time they'd escalated, pushed harder, demanded more proof that he deserved to exist in spaces they'd decided belonged to people who looked like them. Captain, your lead attendant just made a racially charged statement in front of 50 witnesses. I'm giving you one chance to handle this professionally. Harrington's jaw set. The only thing I'm handling is removing you. Security is already on the way. Isaiah felt the shift, the moment when patience became liability, when calm became complicity with your own erasure. He looked at Naomi. Take Zara and sit down. This is going to get worse before it gets better. Naomi hesitated. Then she moved to seat 2A, gathered Zara into her lap. The little girl was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. She didn't understand what was happening. Didn't understand why the adults were being mean to her daddy. Didn't understand why people were saying bad things about her family. Isaiah stayed standing. He was done moving, done accommodating, done making himself smaller to fit into spaces that should have welcomed him in the first place. If they wanted him gone, they would have to remove him by force. And when they did, when they showed the world exactly who they were, he would make sure the consequences followed them for the rest of their lives. Footsteps in the jetway, heavy, multiple people. Port Authority police officers appeared in the doorway, 2 of them, both male, one white, no. Isaiah looked closer. One white, tall, muscular, buzz-cut, aggressive body language. Name tag, D. Morrison. The other was a woman, shorter, Latina, younger, nervous energy. First year on the job written all over her. Name tag, K. Rodriguez. Morrison stepped into the first-class cabin like he owned it. Rodriguez followed, hanging back slightly, hand near her radio but not on it yet. Harrington pointed at Isaiah. "Officers, this passenger has fraudulent tickets and is refusing to deplane. My crew has asked him multiple times to leave. He's disrupting the boarding process and threatening flight safety." Morrison didn't ask for Isaiah's side, didn't request evidence, didn't check the boarding pass. He looked at Isaiah, looked at the hoodie, the sneakers, the skin, and made his decision. "Sir, you need to come with us." Isaiah kept his hands visible, at his sides, non-threatening, because this was the moment when everything could go catastrophically wrong, when a gesture could be misinterpreted, when fear could turn into violence, when the man with the badge and the gun would be believed over the man in the hoodie, regardless of what actually happened. "I have a valid ticket." The scanner accepted it at the gate. "I'd like to leave voluntarily, but I want to take my daughter first." Morrison stepped closer. "Too late for voluntary. You're under arrest for criminal trespass and interfering with a flight crew." "Turn around." Rodriguez spoke for the first time, voice quiet. "Darius, maybe we should check the—" Morrison cut her off. "I said turn around." Isaiah looked at Naomi. She was filming, phone steady despite her shaking hands. Zara was still crying. The other passengers were recording. Malik's live stream had 2.4 million viewers and climbing. Isaiah turned around, put his hands behind his back, felt Morrison grab his left wrist, yank it up higher than necessary, felt the metal handcuffs close around his wrist. Heard the ratcheting clicks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. "The cuffs are too tight. You're cutting off circulation." Morrison's voice was loud, performative, meant for the audience. "Stop resisting!" Isaiah wasn't resisting. He stood completely still, hands behind his back, offering no resistance whatsoever. But Morrison needed the narrative, needed to justify what came next. Morrison pulled. Isaiah's legs buckled as blood flow to his hands cut off, as the too tight cuffs ground metal against bone. He tried to catch himself, but with his hands bound, he had no balance. His body pitched forward, his face slammed into the armrest of seat 1C. Pain exploded across his temple, bright and sharp and immediate. He tasted copper, blood in his mouth from where he'd bit his lip, felt warmth running down the side of his face, knew without looking that he was bleeding. Zara screamed, a sound that would haunt Isaiah for months afterward. Pure terror. His 6-year-old daughter watching her father being brutalized by police while everyone stood by and did nothing. Naomi was shouting something. Rodriguez had her phone now, was trying to take it. The passengers were on their feet, some filming, some trying to intervene verbally, none of them physically stopping what was happening because everyone knew that stepping between a cop and his target was how you became the next target. Morrison hauled Isaiah to his feet. Isaiah couldn't feel his hands anymore. The world tilted. Concussion, probably. He tried to walk, but his legs weren't responding properly. Morrison solved that problem by dragging him down the aisle. On his back, Isaiah's hoodie rode up. The aircraft carpet, which looked soft but was actually industrial-grade nylon designed for durability, not comfort, scraped against his skin. Friction burns, adding to the collection of injuries. They passed through first class, through business class. Passengers watched. Some looked horrified, some looked away. One white man in row 6 was smiling. Morrison dragged Isaiah through the galley where Vanessa stood with Rosa and another flight attendant. Vanessa's face showed satisfaction. Rosa's showed something else. Guilt, maybe. Or fear that she'd be complicit in whatever this turned into the jetway. The carpeted floor gave way to that textured rubber designed to provide traction. Morrison dumped Isaiah on the floor like a bag of trash. Isaiah's head bounced. More pain, more blood. The bandage someone would later apply couldn't hide the wound. The scar would remain for the rest of his life, a reminder of what happened when you refused to accept that you didn't belong. Rodriguez knelt beside him, voice low. "Sir, your head is bleeding. We need to get you medical attention." Morrison stood over them both. "He's faking. Load him in the van." Rodriguez looked like she wanted to argue, but Morrison was senior. Morrison had 18 years on the job. Morrison knew how to write reports that would make this look justified. So Rodriguez stayed quiet, complicit by silence. Behind them, the aircraft door closed, sealed shut. Vanessa's voice came over the intercom, cheerful and professional. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for that delay. We'll be departing shortly. Can I offer our first-class passengers champagne?" Patricia's voice carried through the closed door. "Yes, please." Isaiah lay on the jetway floor. Blood pooled under his head. His wrist screamed with pain he couldn't feel because the circulation was cut off. His back burned where the carpet had scraped skin raw. His daughter was crying somewhere on the other side of that door, traumatized by watching her father dragged away like a criminal. And Vanessa was serving champagne. Isaiah closed his eyes, not in defeat, not in surrender, but because he needed a moment to center himself, to remember who he was, what he owned, what power he held. They thought this was over. They had no idea it had just begun. 8:43 a.m. The jetway floor was cold. Industrial rubber pressed against Isaiah's cheek, textured ridges digging into skin that had already given too much. Blood spread in a slow radius from his temple, dark against gray flooring. His wrists had stopped hurting 5 minutes ago. That was worse than pain. That was nerve damage. That was permanent. Morrison stood above him, radio crackling with traffic from other terminals. Rodriguez knelt nearby, close enough to show concern but far enough to avoid association. Her hand hovered near her first aid kit but didn't open it. 18 years of experience versus 3 months on the job. Experience always won these battles. Morrison keyed his radio. "Dispatch, this is Morrison at Terminal 5, Gate 12. One in custody. Male, black, early 40s, combative. Requesting transport to holding." Isaiah tried to speak. His mouth wasn't cooperating properly. The words came out slurred. "I wasn't combative." Morrison looked down at him with something approaching pity, the kind of pity you give to people too stupid to understand their own circumstances. "You resisted arrest. It's on body camera." The lie was effortless, practiced. Morrison had written this report before, maybe dozens of times. Subject became agitated. Subject refused commands. Subject forced officers to use necessary restraint to maintain safety. The language would make violence sound clinical, would make brutality sound justified. Rodriguez finally spoke, voice barely above whisper. "Darius, he's bleeding a lot." Morrison didn't look at her. Head wounds bleed. It's superficial. Superficial. The word doctors used when they didn't want to admit responsibility. Isaiah's vision had developed a halo around the edges, bright spots that pulsed with each heartbeat. Concussion symptoms. He'd had one before playing football in high school, recognized the signs. Behind them, through the closed aircraft door, engines began their pre-flight whine. The sound built from bass rumble to higher frequency, that particular note that meant thrust was being tested. Systems were being verified, departure was imminent. Morrison's radio crackled again. "Morrison, this is Sergeant Huang at security desk. We need to talk about your prisoner." Morrison frowned, keyed the radio. "What about him?" "Bring him to the office, now. Don't process him. Don't take him to holding. Bring him directly here." Morrison's jaw tightened. He didn't like being questioned, especially not by Sergeant Huang, who was technically his superior but who Morrison had 6 years seniority on in terms of street time. "Copy that." He looked at Rodriguez. "Get him up." They lifted Isaiah by his arms. Fresh agony shot through his shoulders as bound wrists were leveraged upward. Isaiah's legs worked this time. Barely. They walked him through the terminal, past gates where passengers looked up from phones and laptops and magazines, saw the handcuffs and the blood and the black man between two cops and made their assumptions. Nobody intervened. Nobody questioned. Nobody asked if the man in custody might be innocent. The security office sat at the end of a corridor most passengers never saw, behind a door marked "Authorized Personnel Only." Inside, fluorescent lights hummed overhead, washing everything in that particular shade of institutional beige that made spaces feel like nowhere. Desks, filing cabinets, coffee maker with a pot that looked like it had been burning since before sunrise. Sergeant Linda Huang sat behind the main desk. She was Chinese-American, early 50s, compact and efficient in movement. Her uniform was immaculate despite the early hour. She'd been at JFK for 23 years, worked her way up from patrol to sergeant to de facto commander of Terminal 5 security operations. She'd seen everything airports had to offer. Thought she had anyway. Huang looked up as Morrison and Rodriguez brought Isaiah in. Her eyes went to the blood first, then the too tight handcuffs, then Isaiah's face. Something shifted in her expression. "Name?" Her question was directed at Isaiah, not Morrison. That alone told Isaiah something was different here. "Isaiah Thaddeus Blackwell." Huang typed it into her computer. The keyboard clicks were the only sound for 5 seconds. Then the computer beeped. Not a pleasant beep, an alarm beep, the kind that meant the system had found something significant. Huang's face went carefully neutral. She looked at Morrison. "Remove the cuffs." Morrison's hand went to his belt but didn't reach for the key yet. "Sarge, this guy assaulted flight crew. He's a flight risk." Isaiah felt a laugh trying to escape despite everything. Flight risk. On an airport. The irony was too perfect. Huang's voice dropped into a register that Morrison recognized as non-negotiable. "Remove the cuffs, now!" Morrison pulled the key from his belt, moved behind Isaiah. The cuffs clicked open. Blood rushed back into Isaiah's hands. The sensation was excruciating. Pins and needles multiplied by 1,000. Isaiah swayed. Rodriguez caught his elbow, steadied him. Huang stood, walked around the desk, addressed Morrison and Rodriguez while looking at Isaiah. "Mr. Blackwell is flagged in NCIC as FBI interest. High-value witness protection status. Do not detain order from the director's office." Morrison's face went pale. "That can't be right. He's a ticketing fraud suspect." Huang pulled up her screen, turned it so Morrison could see. The flags were unmistakable. FBI seal, Southern District of New York reference number, a phone number with a 212 area code that meant federal prosecutor. "Does this look wrong to you, Officer Morrison?" Morrison had no response. Rodriguez was staring at Isaiah with new understanding. She'd dragged a federal witness across an aircraft. She'd participated in what was looking more and more like a catastrophic mistake. Huang focused on Isaiah. Mr. Blackwell, I need to ask you some questions. You have the right to remain silent, but you are not under arrest. You are free to leave at any time. Do you understand? Isaiah nodded. The motion made his head throb. Did you assault anyone on that aircraft? No. Did you threaten anyone? No. Did you refuse to comply with lawful orders from the flight crew? The question was more complex than it appeared. Isaiah thought about Vanessa's demand that he move to economy. Harrington's order to leave the plane. Were those lawful orders? Could crew members order passengers to vacate paid seats based on unfounded suspicion? I refused to give up a seat I'd paid for when I was accused of fraud without evidence. Huang nodded slowly. She turned to Morrison. Did you witness Mr. Blackwell commit any crime? Morrison's training kicked in. Never admit doubt. Never show weakness. The captain said he was disrupting the flight crew. That's interference with flight crew under federal law. Did you personally witness the disruption, or did you take the captain's word for it? Morrison realized the trap too late. The captain is a reliable source, so you didn't personally witness any crime. You arrested a man based solely on accusations from airline employees who might have their own motivations. Morrison's jaw worked. Rodriguez looked at the floor. Huang turned back to Isaiah. Mr. Blackwell, I need you to understand something. What happened on that aircraft is going to be investigated. Port Authority Internal Affairs will be involved. The FBI Civil Rights Division will likely be involved. This is not going away quietly. Do you need medical attention? Isaiah touched his temple gently. His fingers came away red. Probably, but first I need to make a phone call. Huang gestured to the desk phone. Use that line. Dial 9 for outside. Isaiah picked up the receiver. His hands were shaking now, adrenaline finally catching up with shock. He dialed from memory. The number rang 4 times. Isaiah checked his watch. 8:53 a.m. Eastern, 1:53 p.m. in London. Theodore would be at the board lunch. Hopefully he'd answer. Click. The voice that came through was clipped British accent, refined by decades in boardrooms and first-class cabins. Isaiah, I wasn't expecting your call until you landed. Theodore, I need you to ground Flight 237, right now. There was a pause. In that pause, Isaiah heard the shift from social pleasantry to crisis management. I'm sorry, what? Ground the plane. Immediately, before it leaves the gate. Isaiah, what's happened? Your lead flight attendant accused me of credit card theft. Your captain authorized my arrest without checking evidence. Port Authority dragged me off the aircraft. I'm bleeding from the head. I'm in the security office, and that plane is about to depart with my wife and daughter on it while I'm in custody. The silence on the other end lasted 3 seconds. Then Theodore's voice came back, sharp enough to cut glass. Dear God, where are you exactly? Terminal 5, security office. Don't move. Don't speak to anyone else. I'm calling JFK operations immediately. Theodore, one more thing. Yes? The crew needs to know who I am before that plane takes off. Isaiah could almost hear Theodore's mind working through implications, calculating consequences. Understood. I'll handle it. The line went dead. Isaiah set the receiver back in its cradle, looked at Huang. You're about to get a very interesting phone call. Huang's desk phone rang 15 seconds later. She picked up. Sergeant Huang, Terminal 5 Security. Her face changed as she listened, shifted from professional neutrality to something approaching alarm. Yes, Mr. Delacroix. I understand. He's here. No, he's injured. Port Authority removed him from the aircraft. I've already released him from custody. Yes, sir. Immediately. She hung up, looked at Morrison and Rodriguez with an expression that could have frozen the East River. That was Richard Delacroix, JFK General Manager. Flight 237 is under federal hold. The aircraft is being recalled to the gate, and you two are suspended pending investigation. Morrison's face went from pale to gray. Suspended? For what? We responded to a crew request for assistance, for excessive use of force, for failure to investigate before making an arrest, for ignoring evidence that Mr. Blackwell had valid documentation. Internal Affairs will contact you both within 24 hours. Turn in your duty weapons and badges. You're on administrative leave as of now. Rodriguez looked like she might cry. Morrison looked like he might break something. Neither of them moved. Huang's voice became steel. Now, officers, they complied. Weapons on the desk, badges beside them. Morrison's hand lingered on his badge for a moment, fingers tracing the Port Authority seal. 18 years of his life reduced to a piece of metal on a desk. Rodriguez spoke quietly, directed at Isaiah. Mr. Blackwell, I'm sorry. I should have said something. I should have stopped him. Isaiah looked at her. She was young, scared, complicit, yes, but less culpable than Morrison, who'd orchestrated the violence with the confidence of someone who'd never faced consequences. You should have, but you didn't. That choice will follow you. Rodriguez nodded. She understood. The badge might come back eventually after investigation and discipline and mandatory training, but the knowledge that she'd stood by while someone was brutalized would stay with her forever. Morrison and Rodriguez left. The office felt larger without them. Huang came around the desk again. Mr. Blackwell, I need to be honest with you. What happened on that aircraft is unconscionable. But I need to know something. Are you actually FBI witness protection? Isaiah almost smiled. The pain in his head prevented it. No, I'm on the FBI's radar because my company works with defense contractors. But I'm not under protection. I'm just someone who appears in their database. So the flags in NCIC are real. But they're there because the Bureau conducts regular background checks on people with security clearances. Not because I'm in danger. Huang processed this. And the phone call you just made, who was that? Sir Theodore Ashford, chairman of Skyward Airlines. Huang's eyes widened fractionally. You know the chairman personally? In a manner of speaking. As of last Tuesday, I own Skyward Airlines. 100% controlling interest, $2.8 billion acquisition. The silence that followed was profound. Huang stared at Isaiah, doing the mental math. The man in the hoodie, the man accused of credit card fraud, the man dragged off a plane and dumped bleeding on a jetway floor. That man owned the airline. Oh my God. Isaiah's phone vibrated in his pocket. He pulled it out. Text from Naomi. 3 words. Are you okay? He typed back with thumbs that were still numb. Yes, stay on plane, coming back. Another text appeared. This one from Theodore. Flight grounded. JFK ops notified, FBI en route. Are you safe? Isaiah responded. Safe. Need medical attention, but stable. Theodore's reply was immediate. Ambulance dispatched. I'm sending Marcus DuPont from your security team. He'll be there in 6 minutes. Isaiah looked up at Huang. You're about to have a very complicated morning, Sergeant. Huang sat down in her chair like her legs had given up. Mr. Blackwell, I need to understand something. Why didn't you tell the officers who you were? Because the point wasn't who I am. The point was how they treated someone they said couldn't fight back. But you can fight back. Yes, and I will. But not because I'm wealthy. Because what happened to me happens to people who don't own airlines every single day. People who can't make phone calls that ground planes, people who don't have FBI flags in federal databases. Those people get dragged off aircraft, get beaten by police, get dismissed by flight crews who decide their tickets are fraudulent based on nothing but skin color. And then they disappear into the system and nobody cares because nobody with power is watching. Huang absorbed this. She'd worked at JFK long enough to know Isaiah was right. Had seen incidents that never made the news. Passengers removed, complaints filed and buried, the machinery of discrimination operating with bureaucratic efficiency. So what happens now? Isaiah checked his watch. 8:58 a.m. The plane had been scheduled to depart at 8:55. It should be pushing back from the gate right now, beginning its taxi to the runway. Instead, it was being recalled. Passengers would be confused. Crew would be panicking. And somewhere in the cockpit, Harrington was about to receive a radio call that would end his career. Now, Sergeant Huang, justice happens, the kind that leaves a mark. Outside, sirens approached. Ambulance. Isaiah could hear the distinctive warble even through the office walls. His head throbbed in time with the sound. The world had developed a tilt that wasn't improving. The office door burst open. Marcus DuPont entered like a force of nature. 6'4", 240 pounds of former Secret Service precision wrapped in a Tom Ford suit. He'd been Isaiah's head of security for 6 years, ever since leaving the Presidential Protection Detail. His eyes scanned the room in half a second, cataloging threats and exits and the blood on Isaiah's face. "Boss, ambulance is outside. We need to get you checked out." Isaiah stood. The room tilted more aggressively. Marcus caught his elbow. "Easy. Concussion protocol, no sudden movements. I need to get back to that plane, after medical clears you." "No arguments." Marcus looked at Huang. "Sergeant, I'm going to need copies of all incident reports filed this morning. Body camera footage from both officers, gate camera footage, aircraft interior cameras if they exist." Huang nodded. "I'll have everything ready within the hour." Marcus guided Isaiah toward the door. The hallway beyond felt too bright, fluorescent lights stabbing into eyes that wanted darkness and quiet. The ambulance waited just outside the terminal. Doors open, EMTs ready. The next 20 minutes became a blur of medical efficiency. Blood pressure checked, pupils examined with a pen light that made Isaiah's skull feel like it might crack open. Wound cleaned and bandaged. The EMT, a woman in her 30s with the weary competence of someone who'd seen worse, applied butterfly closures to the gash on Isaiah's temple. "You need a CT scan, could be serious bleeding under the skull." Isaiah shook his head carefully. "Later. I need to get back to that aircraft first." The EMT looked at Marcus, who shrugged. "He's the boss. I just work here. Sir, if you have an epidural hematoma and don't get treatment, you could die." Isaiah fixed her with a look that had ended boardroom arguments. "Then I'll die after I finish what I came here to do." The EMT sighed, made Isaiah sign a release form refusing transport, gave him printed instructions about warning signs to watch for, made him promise he'd go to an ER within 2 hours. Isaiah promised, meant it even, after he dealt with Vanessa and Harrington and Patricia and everyone else who'd decided he didn't deserve dignity. Marcus had changed clothes while Isaiah was being examined. The suit was gone. Now he wore tactical pants, a black polo with security embroidered on the chest, and an earpiece connected to a radio. 3 other members of Isaiah's security team had materialized, forming a perimeter around the ambulance. Marcus handed Isaiah a garment bag. "You can't go back on that plane in a bloody hoodie. Change." Inside the ambulance, with EMTs politely looking away, Isaiah stripped off the ruined hoodie and joggers. Underneath, his back was cross-hatched with friction burns from the carpet. They'd need treatment too, but later. Everything could wait for later. The garment bag contained a navy Tom Ford suit, fresh white shirt, burgundy tie, black Berluti Oxfords. Isaiah dressed carefully, each movement deliberate to avoid aggravating the head injury. The transformation was remarkable. The man who emerged from the ambulance bore no resemblance to the man who'd been dragged off the plane 40 minutes earlier. This was Isaiah Blackwell, chairman of Blackwell Aviation Holdings. This was power made visible. Marcus handed him a phone, different from the one Isaiah had been carrying. "Secure line. Your attorneys are on standby. Sullivan and Cromwell sent 3 partners. They're waiting at the gate." Isaiah nodded, regretted the motion immediately as pain spiked behind his eyes. But the pain was clarifying, sharpened focus, reminded him why this mattered. They walked back through the terminal. Passengers stared. Isaiah ignored them. His focus was singular now. Gate 12, Flight 237. The reckoning that was 3 decades overdue. The gate area had transformed. What had been a normal boarding process 90 minutes ago was now a crime scene. Not officially, not yet, but the energy was unmistakable. Port Authority supervisors clustered near the podium. JFK operations managers spoke in urgent tones on radios. And standing near the jetway entrance, looking official and terrified in equal measure, were 3 attorneys in expensive suits carrying briefcases that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. The lead attorney approached. Catherine Wu, senior partner at Sullivan and Cromwell, specialist in aviation law and civil rights litigation. She'd represented Isaiah in the Skyward acquisition. Now she was about to represent him in something far more interesting. Isaiah, we got the call from Theodore 15 minutes ago. Briefed on the situation. We're ready to proceed however you want. I want the crew arrested, I want the officers prosecuted, and I want this airline reformed from top to bottom. Catherine nodded. FBI Civil Rights Division is sending 2 agents. They'll be here in 10 minutes. We've also contacted AUSA Blackwell at the Southern District. Isaiah raised an eyebrow. You called my wife? She's the best civil rights prosecutor in New York. And technically, this is her district. Conflict of interest? Probably. She can't prosecute this case personally, but she can make sure it gets assigned to someone who will. Isaiah looked toward the gate. The aircraft sat there, door still closed, but he could see movement through the windows. Passengers getting restless, crew getting nervous. Has anyone told them who I am yet? Theodore wanted to wait until you arrived. Thought the impact would be greater if you delivered the news personally. Isaiah smiled. It hurt. He didn't care. Then let's not keep them waiting. The jetway door opened. Marcus entered first, scanning for threats with the paranoia of someone who'd spent a career assuming everyone was dangerous until proven otherwise. The attorneys followed, then Isaiah, flanked by 2 more security team members. The aircraft interior had changed. Passengers who'd been seated were now standing in the aisles, demanding explanations. Vanessa stood near the galley, trying to maintain order with decreasing success. Rosa hovered nearby, looking like she wanted to disappear into the overhead compartments. And in the cockpit doorway, Harrington stood with arms crossed, projecting authority he no longer possessed. Isaiah walked down the aisle. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. The passenger in seat 2F, Malik Washington, the YouTuber, raised his camera. His live stream, which had dipped to 3 million viewers during the delay, spiked back to 7 million as word spread that something significant was happening. Isaiah reached the front of the first-class cabin, stood in the space where he'd been handcuffed 45 minutes earlier. Blood had been cleaned from the carpet, but if you looked carefully, you could still see the stain. Vanessa saw him. Recognition came in stages. First confusion. Who was this man in the expensive suit? Then recognition. Same face, different clothes. Then horror. The man she'd accused of credit card theft had returned, and he'd brought lawyers. Isaiah spoke. His voice carried through the cabin, quiet but absolutely clear. Good morning. For those who weren't here earlier, my name is Isaiah Thaddeus Blackwell. As of March 10th, 2026, Blackwell Aviation Holdings completed the acquisition of Skyward Airlines. 100% controlling interest. I own this company. Silence. Absolute. The kind of silence that happens when reality shifts sideways and everyone needs a moment to recalculate. 37 minutes ago, I was dragged off this aircraft, handcuffed. My head was slammed into an armrest. I sustained a concussion, lacerations, and nerve damage. This happened in front of 50 witnesses and was live-streamed to millions of people around the world. Isaiah looked directly at Vanessa. Your lead flight attendant accused me of credit card theft. She told the cabin that people like me, and I quote, get card numbers off the dark web. That's what people like them do anyway. She was referring to me, my wife, who has a law degree from Yale and prosecutes federal crimes, and my 6-year-old daughter. Vanessa's face had gone the color of ash. Isaiah turned to Harrington. "Your captain, without examining a single piece of evidence, authorized my arrest. When I asked him to verify my ticket with the chairman of the board, he laughed. He said, and I quote, 'On my aircraft I am the law.' He was wrong. This isn't his aircraft, it's mine." Harrington tried to speak. No words came out. Isaiah addressed the entire cabin. "I gave multiple opportunities for this situation to be resolved. At TSA, at the gate, at the lounge, and finally, on this aircraft. Each time I was patient. Each time I provided documentation. Each time I was treated as a criminal based solely on my appearance. That ends today." He looked at Marcus, who stepped forward with a radio. "Captain Harrington, you're terminated. Effective immediately. Security will escort you off this aircraft." Harrington found his voice. "You can't fire me. I have a union contract. I can fire you for cause. Cause being that you authorized the assault of the company owner based on racial prejudice. Your contract doesn't protect you from that." Two security team members moved toward Harrington. He backed into the cockpit. They followed. 30 seconds later, they emerged with Harrington between them. His face had cycled through denial to rage to something approaching understanding. His career was over. 35 years of flying. Gone. Isaiah turned to Vanessa. "Vanessa Cordelia Whitmore, you're terminated, and you're under arrest." The FBI agents had arrived during Isaiah's speech. Special Agent Sarah Mendez and her partner, Agent Raymond Kwan, stood at the rear of first class. Mendez stepped forward now, FBI credentials displayed. "Ms. Whitmore, I'm Special Agent Mendez, FBI Civil Rights Division. You're under arrest for violation of Title 18, United States Code Section 242. Civil rights violation under color of law." Vanessa began crying, actual tears. Whether from remorse or fear was unclear. "I didn't mean anything by it. I was just doing my job. Your job is not to racially profile passengers. Your job is not to accuse people of crimes without evidence. Your job is not to humiliate families in front of crowds." Mendez produced handcuffs, not the metal ones Morrison had used, plastic flex cuffs, less damaging but just as effective. She placed them on Vanessa's wrists with professional efficiency. Read her Miranda rights in a tone that suggested she'd done this 1,000 times. Isaiah looked at Patricia Carrington Ross, who'd been sitting in her reassigned seat, 1K, Naomi's original seat, watching events unfold with growing horror. "Mrs. Carrington Ross, you're not being arrested, but you are being removed from this aircraft and banned from Skyward Airlines permanently. Your husband's corporate account with Ross Capital Management is terminated. The $4.7 million your company spends annually on our airline will be spent elsewhere." Patricia stood, face flushed. "You can't do this to me. My husband will sue you into bankruptcy." Isaiah's smile was razor thin. "Mrs. Carrington Ross, I'm worth $8.4 billion. Your husband's hedge fund manages $2 billion in assets. If you want a legal war, I promise you'll lose more than just access to first-class seats." Security escorted Patricia out. She went quietly, but the rage radiating from her was palpable. Isaiah scanned the cabin, found Naomi and Zara in the back, seat 12F and 12G, where they'd been moved during the chaos. Zara was still crying, face buried in Naomi's shoulder. Isaiah walked back, knelt beside them despite the head injury that made the world tilt. "Baby girl, I'm okay. Daddy's okay." Zara looked up, saw the bandage. Fresh tears came. "They hurt you." Isaiah pulled her into a hug that was probably too tight, but that he couldn't help. "They did, but I'm going to make sure they never hurt anyone else again. I promise you that." Naomi's hand found the back of Isaiah's neck. Her voice was controlled, but fury lived underneath. "I filmed everything. Every second. It's backed up to 3 cloud services." "Good, we'll need it." Isaiah stood, addressed the attorneys. I want every complaint filed against Skyward in the past 5 years pulled. I want patterns identified. I want victims contacted. And I want the person who allowed this culture to exist held accountable. Catherine nodded. Already in motion. Kroll is expanding their investigation. We'll have preliminary results in 48 hours. Isaiah looked at Malik Washington, still filming. Mr. Washington, you were live streaming when they removed me. Malik lowered the camera slightly. Yes, sir. 8.3 million people watched live. It's already been clipped and shared on every platform. Probably going to hit 50 million views by end of day. Isaiah nodded slowly. You did good work. Thank you for bearing witness. I couldn't not film it, you know? That was wrong. What they did to you was wrong. Yes, it was, and now millions of people know exactly how wrong. Isaiah turned back to face the cabin. Most passengers were still standing, phones out, recording this epilogue to the morning's violence. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the delay. This flight will depart as soon as we secure a replacement captain and lead flight attendant. If you prefer to take a different flight, Skyward will accommodate you on any carrier at our expense. If you choose to stay, your tickets are upgraded to the highest class available, and you'll receive compensation equal to the full ticket price. Someone in business class started clapping. Others joined. Within seconds, the cabin erupted in applause. Not everyone. The white man in row 6 who'd smiled while Isaiah was being dragged away sat with arms crossed, scowling. But he was outnumbered. Isaiah walked back down the aisle toward the exit, past the seat where he'd been handcuffed, past the spot where his head had struck metal, past the carpet that still held traces of his blood. Marcus and the security team formed a protective cordon as they left the aircraft. The jetway felt different this time. No longer a site of humiliation, but a battlefield where Isaiah had claimed victory. Not the final victory. That would take months, years perhaps, but the first victory, the one that mattered most. Sergeant Huang met them at the gate. Mr. Blackwell, FBI wants a formal statement. Hospital wants to do that CT scan, and your attorney has about 6 reporters who somehow heard about this and want interviews. Isaiah checked his watch. 9:27 a.m. Less than 3 hours since he'd dropped Zara at school. It felt like a lifetime. Hospital first, statement second. Reporters can wait. And Sergeant Huang, yes, sir? Thank you for doing the right thing. For checking who I was instead of just accepting Morrison's version of events. Huang's expression softened slightly. I've been doing this job for 23 years. I've seen too many people get hurt because officers didn't ask questions. I'm sorry I couldn't stop it before you were injured. Isaiah extended his hand. Huang shook it carefully, avoiding his damaged wrists. You stopped it from getting worse. That matters. They walked through the terminal, past gates where other flights were boarding normally. Passengers oblivious to the drama that had unfolded 200 feet away. Past restaurants where travelers ate overpriced breakfast sandwiches. Past newsstands where tabloids screamed about celebrities and scandals that would be forgotten in a week. Isaiah's phone buzzed. Text from Theodore. Board meeting moved to emergency session. Video conference in 2 hours. Need you present if possible. Isaiah responded. I'll be there. Outside, a car waited. Not the Honda Accord. A black Cadillac Escalade with bulletproof glass and armor plating that could stop a rifle round. Marcus opened the back door. Isaiah climbed in. Naomi and Zara were already inside, having been escorted through a different exit. Zara crawled into Isaiah's lap despite being too big for it. He held her anyway. Felt her heartbeat against his chest, rapid but starting to slow. She'd be traumatized by this morning. Would probably need therapy. Would definitely have nightmares. But she'd also learned a lesson that no classroom could teach. She'd learned that power matters. That justice requires fighting. That her father would burn the world down before he let anyone make her feel less than. The Escalade pulled away from the curb. In the side mirror, Isaiah watched JFK recede. Somewhere in that building, Vanessa was being processed into federal custody. Harrington was calling his union rep, who would explain that unions don't protect you from civil rights violations. Patricia was calling her husband, who would be furious until his lawyers explained that Isaiah could tie them up in litigation for years if he wanted. And on Flight 237, a new crew was boarding. A crew that had been briefed in detail about what happened. A crew that knew their new owner had been dragged bleeding off an aircraft that morning. A crew that understood, perhaps for the first time in Skyward's 30-year history, that passengers deserved dignity regardless of what they looked like or how they dressed. Isaiah's phone buzzed again, this time an email from Kroll. Subject line, preliminary findings. He opened it, read the first paragraph, felt rage crystallize into something colder and more focused. 47 complaints. 47 passengers of color who'd been questioned, humiliated, removed, or banned. 47 instances where crew members had decided that skin color meant criminality. And every single complaint had been dismissed by Jonathan Whitfield Lancaster, VP of Operations, who'd built his career on protecting racist crew members and suppressing evidence of systemic discrimination. Isaiah forwarded the email to Catherine Wu, added 3 words, destroy him legally. The Escalade merged onto the Van Wyck Expressway, heading toward Manhattan and the hospital where doctors would confirm what Isaiah already knew. Concussion, lacerations, bruising, nerve damage that might be permanent, psychological trauma to his daughter that definitely would be. But Isaiah had something else now too. He had evidence. He had witnesses. He had live stream video watched by millions. He had lawyers who were very good at their jobs. And he had the kind of anger that didn't burn hot and fade fast, but smoldered cold and lasted forever. Vanessa Whitmore thought this was over. She was wrong. Harrington thought losing his job was the worst that could happen. He had no idea Patricia Carrington Ross thought being banned from an airline was an inconvenience. She'd learn otherwise. And Jonathan Lancaster, who'd spent 15 years building a culture of discrimination while hiding behind corporate bureaucracy, was about to discover what happened when the person you wronged owned everything you'd built your career on. Isaiah looked out the window. Manhattan's skyline rose ahead, steel and glass reaching toward clouds that threatened rain. The city where he'd been kicked out of stores as a teenager, where he'd been followed by security guards, where he'd been pulled over by police for driving while black in a neighborhood that decided he didn't belong. The city that would now watch him take apart every system that had ever decided his skin made him suspect. The plane that had rejected him would fly today, eventually, with a new crew, under new management, following new policies that Isaiah would write himself. And every flight from this day forward would carry the ghost of this morning. Would remind crew members what happened when they forgot that passengers were human beings, deserving of respect. Zara had fallen asleep in his arms. Naomi's hand rested on his knee. Marcus sat in the front seat, already on the phone coordinating the next 12 hours of logistics. The hospital, the statement, the emergency board meeting where Isaiah would explain to Theodore and the other directors exactly how close they'd come to destroying their airline's reputation forever. But all of that was future. Right now, in this moment, Isaiah had what he needed most: his family, his resources, and a plan that would make sure the world remembered what happened when you dragged a man off his own plane and tried to tell him he didn't belong. The CT scan showed what Isaiah already knew. Concussion. Grade 2, the neurologist explained with the careful tone doctors used when delivering news that wasn't terrible but wasn't good. Subdural bleeding, minimal but present. Observation required. Rest mandatory. Follow-up in 72 hours non-negotiable. Isaiah signed discharge papers against medical advice for the second time that day. The neurologist, a South Asian woman in her 40s who'd introduced herself as Dr. Patel, looked at him with the exhaustion of someone who'd spent a career watching patients ignore expertise. Mr. Blackwell, If that bleeding increases, you could have a stroke. You could die. Do you understand what I'm telling you? I understand. I also have a video conference with my board of directors in 90 minutes that will determine whether we contain this crisis or watch it metastasize. I'll rest after that. Dr. Patel handed him printed instructions identical to the ones the EMT had given him hours earlier. The redundancy felt accusatory. Headache worse than right now, vision changes, nausea, confusion, any of those symptoms, you call 911 immediately. No debate. Isaiah folded the papers and tucked them in his suit pocket. The Tom Ford jacket had a blood spot near the collar that dry cleaning might or might not remove. He'd add it to the evidence file. Everything was evidence now. New York Presbyterian Hospital's VIP wing existed for people who required privacy with their medical care. The room where Isaiah had been examined looked nothing like the emergency department most patients experienced. Hardwood floors instead of linoleum, artwork instead of anatomy posters. A coffee machine that served actual espresso instead of whatever burned in the public waiting room pots. Naomi sat in a leather chair by the window, laptop open, already drafting the legal strategy that would define the next 6 months. She'd made calls during Isaiah's CT scan, reached out to contacts at the Southern District, explained the situation in the clinical language prosecutors used to discuss civil rights violations. Got commitments that this case would be prioritized, that Vanessa Whitmore and Randall Harrington would face federal charges, not just termination. Zara slept on a medical examination table that had been converted into a makeshift bed with blankets the nurses had provided. Her face was peaceful now, no trace of the morning's terror visible in sleep. But Isaiah knew nightmares would come, knew therapy would be necessary, knew his daughter had learned lessons about the world that 6-year-olds shouldn't have to learn. Marcus appeared in the doorway. He'd changed clothes again. Back to the Tom Ford suit, back to looking like private security for someone important rather than tactical response for a crisis situation. Car's ready. I've got a secure connection set up at your office for the video conference. IT confirmed encryption. Theodore's office in London is standing by. Isaiah stood, the room tilted. He gripped the edge of the examination table until the vertigo passed. Concussion symptoms. Dr. Patel had warned him. Standing too quickly would trigger them. So would screens. So would stress. So would pretty much everything Isaiah needed to do in the next 12 hours. Naomi closed her laptop. I'm coming with you. Someone needs to stay with Zara. She's asleep. The nurses said they'd watch her. You need me there. This is my area of expertise. Isaiah wanted to argue, couldn't find grounds. Naomi had prosecuted civil rights cases for 6 years, had put corrupt cops in prison, had dismantled discriminatory systems. If anyone understood how to weaponize the law against institutional racism, it was her. Fine. But if I collapse during the meeting, you're explaining to Dr. Patel why I ignored her advice. If you collapse during the meeting, I'm dragging you back here myself. They left the hospital through a private exit that bypassed the main lobby where 3 news crews had set up, hoping for a statement. The video from Malik Washington's live stream had done exactly what Isaiah predicted. 53 million views as of noon, trending on every platform. Cable news couldn't stop showing the footage of Isaiah being dragged down the aisle, blood visible even in the shaky phone video. The Escalade navigated Manhattan traffic with the aggressive efficiency of drivers who knew that black SUVs with tinted windows usually carried people important enough to make other cars move. They arrived at Blackwell Aviation Holdings headquarters on Park Avenue in 22 minutes. The building was glass and steel, 40 stories of carefully managed wealth. Isaiah's office occupied the entire 40th floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered views of Manhattan that would cost most people a year's salary just to see once. The conference room where the video call would take place had been designed for exactly these situations. Crisis management, emergency board sessions, conversations that would determine whether companies lived or died. IT had set up 3 large monitors. The center screen would show Theodore and the Skyward board members calling in from London. The left screen would display the Kroll investigation findings. The right screen was reserved for legal counsel, Catherine Wu and her team at Sullivan and Cromwell. Isaiah sat at the head of the table. Naomi took the seat to his right. Marcus stood near the door, positioned to intercept any interruption. The clock on the wall showed 11:47. 13 minutes until the call. Isaiah's phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. Mr. Blackwell, this is Keisha Chambers. I was fired from Skyward 4 months ago for reporting Vanessa Whitmore. I saw the video. I have recordings, emails, witness statements. I want to help. Isaiah showed the message to Naomi. Her eyes narrowed in the way they did when she saw an angle no one else had noticed. She's your key witness, whistleblower with documentation. That's a prosecutor's dream. Isaiah typed back. Ms. Chambers, thank you for reaching out. My attorneys will contact you within the hour. What happened to you matters. We're going to make it right. The response came 30 seconds later. Thank you. I thought no one would ever listen. Isaiah set the phone down, looked at Naomi. Vanessa fired her. Lancaster dismissed her complaint. The system protected the perpetrator and punished the witness. How many others are out there? Naomi pulled up a document on her laptop. The preliminary Kroll report, 47 complaints, 47 names, 47 people who'd been wronged and then ignored. We're about to find out. The monitors flickered to life at exactly noon. Theodore Ashford appeared on the center screen sitting at a conference table in Skyward's London headquarters. Behind him, Isaiah could see 12 board members, investors, industry veterans, people who'd built careers in aviation and who were now watching their airline's reputation implode in real time. Theodore looked older than he had 4 days ago when Isaiah had signed the acquisition papers. The stress had carved new lines around his eyes. Isaiah, thank God you're all right. We saw the footage. Everyone saw the footage. I'm functional, concussed, but functional. One of the board members leaned forward. Beatrice Sutherland, representing a pension fund that owned 8% of the company before Isaiah's acquisition. She'd been skeptical of the sale, had argued for keeping Skyward independent. Now she looked like someone reassessing every assumption. Mr. Blackwell, we need to understand the scope of this crisis. The stock price was down 23% this morning, I'm aware. It'll recover. But first we need to address the systemic failures that led to this incident. Theodore cleared his throat. The board has reviewed the preliminary Kroll report. 47 complaints, all dismissed by Jonathan Lancaster. We had no idea the problem was this extensive. That's because Lancaster made sure you had no idea. He built a system designed to hide discrimination, made it invisible, made the victims disappear into bureaucratic processes that went nowhere. Catherine Wu appeared on the right screen. She'd pulled files already, had them organized in digital folders that displayed on the monitor with the precision of someone who'd done this before. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, we've identified a pattern that constitutes systematic civil rights violations. Lancaster's policy manual, written in 2021 and distributed to all crew supervisors, explicitly states that crew judgment supersedes passenger documentation in disputes. That policy is facially discriminatory and violates multiple federal statutes. Theodore looked at someone off camera, presumably legal counsel in London. That person must have nodded because Theodore turned back to the screen. We're terminating Lancaster immediately. For cause. Isaiah shook his head carefully. The motion triggered a spike of pain behind his eyes. Not enough. The board members shifted in their seats. Beatrice leaned forward again. What more do you want? I want Lancaster sued personally. I want his pension voided. I want him banned from aviation permanently, and I want the FAA to investigate every policy decision he made in the past 5 years. Theodore's expression flickered between shock and something approaching admiration. Isaiah, that's scorched earth. That's accountability. Lancaster didn't make one mistake. He made 47. He built a culture where crew members felt empowered to racially profile passengers, where complaints were dismissed without investigation, where victims were blamed for their own mistreatment. That's not incompetence. That's malice. And malice deserves to be punished so thoroughly that no one in this industry ever considers replicating it. One of the other board members spoke up. Marcus Drummond, former CEO of another airline, brought on to Skyward's board for his operational expertise. Mr. Blackwell, I understand you're angry. What happened to you was inexcusable. But destroying Lancaster's life won't fix the systemic problems. You're right, it won't fix them. But it will send a message to every other VP of operations at every other airline that protecting racist employees has consequences that extend beyond termination. It will make executives think twice before dismissing complaints. It will make them understand that their careers are forfeit if they enable discrimination. The room in London went quiet. Isaiah could see them processing. These were people who'd spent careers in an industry where labor disputes got settled quietly, where bad employees got transferred instead of fired, where scandals got buried under settlements with non-disclosure agreements. Isaiah was proposing something different, something public, something that would make headlines and set precedents and fundamentally alter how airlines handled discrimination complaints. Naomi spoke for the first time, voice carrying the authority of someone who'd put people in federal prison. The legal exposure here extends beyond civil liability. The Department of Justice is already reviewing this case for potential criminal charges under Title 18, Section 242. That's civil rights violations under color of law. It applies to private actors in federally regulated industries. If DOJ finds a pattern of discrimination that Lancaster enabled, he could face up to 10 years in federal prison. The board members looked at each other. Theodore ran a hand through his silver hair. What do you need from us, Isaiah? Full cooperation with federal investigators, access to all HR files, complaint records, and internal communications, termination of every employee who appears in multiple complaints, and a complete overhaul of company policy, supervised by an independent monitor with quarterly reports to the FAA and DOJ. Theodore nodded slowly. You'll have it. All of it. Isaiah pulled up the left screen where the Kroll findings waited. There's more. Kroll identified 19 complaints against Vanessa Whitmore specifically, 11 against Captain Harrington, 8 against 2 other flight attendants. The pattern is unmistakable. These weren't rogue employees, they were protected employees. Lancaster promoted Whitmore twice despite complaints, gave Harrington commendations, rewarded the very people who were destroying your brand. Beatrice's face had gone hard. Were any board members aware of this? Theodore shook his head. Complaint summaries came through quarterly reports. Lancaster presented them as frivolous grievances from disgruntled passengers. We had no reason to question his characterization. That's the problem. You trusted a VP to police himself, gave him authority without oversight, and he used that authority to shield racists while silencing victims. One of the quieter board members, an older white man whose name Isaiah couldn't remember, spoke up. Mr. Blackwell, I've been in aviation for 40 years. I've never seen anything like this. How do we make sure it never happens again? You start by believing passengers when they file complaints. You investigate every accusation. You create third-party reporting mechanisms so employees can't bury evidence. You hire a chief diversity officer who reports directly to me, not to operations. And you fire anyone who shows even a hint of discriminatory behavior. Zero tolerance. No second chances. The board spent the next 90 minutes drilling into details. Catherine walked them through the legal strategy. explained how the class action lawsuit would work. 47 plaintiffs, each with documented complaints that Lancaster had dismissed, explained the settlement structure Isaiah was proposing. Every victim would receive compensation, not settlements that required silence, payments that came with public acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Theodore asked the question Isaiah had been waiting for. What's this going to cost? Financially? Probably $200 million in settlements, legal fees, and operational changes. Reputationally? That depends on how we handle it. If we fight the victims, deny responsibility, act like typical corporate defendants, the brand dies. But if we own this failure, apologize publicly, demonstrate real change, we might come out stronger. How? Because right now, every airline in America has the same problem we do. Discrimination complaints that get buried, crew members who abuse their authority, passengers who suffer in silence because they know complaining is pointless. We're just the first airline where someone with power got targeted, but we won't be the last. And when the next incident happens at Delta or United or American, passengers will remember that Skyward didn't just fire the guilty parties. We rebuilt the entire system. We became the airline that actually gives a damn about dignity. The screen showed Theodore considering this. He'd built Skyward over 30 years. Taken it from a startup with 2 planes to a transatlantic carrier with a fleet of 70 aircraft. His legacy was at stake, but so was the right thing to do. Isaiah watched the internal calculation play out across Theodore's face. Finally, Theodore nodded. Do it, all of it, whatever you need. The call ended at 2:17 p.m. Isaiah sat back in his chair. The headache that Dr. Patel had warned about was building behind his eyes. Pressure that felt like his skull was too small for his brain. He needed rest, needed darkness, needed time for the subdural bleeding to stop being a medical concern and start being a healing injury. But rest would have to wait, because Catherine was pulling up another screen. This one showed FBI case files. Agent Mendez had moved fast. Vanessa Whitmore had been formally charged an hour ago. Harrington 30 minutes after that. Both were being held pending bail hearings tomorrow morning. Naomi leaned close, voice quiet enough that only Isaiah could hear. You need to stop. You've been running on adrenaline for 6 hours. Eventually your body is going to shut down. After I talk to the victims, after I make sure they know someone is listening. Catherine looked up from her laptop. I've been reaching out to the 47 complainants. Contacted 23 so far. 16 have agreed to participate in the class action. 3 are deceased. 2 are unreachable. The rest are considering. Isaiah felt something crack in his chest. 3 deceased. People who'd filed complaints about discrimination and then disappeared from the record. Heart attacks, cancer, car accidents, natural causes probably. But they died without seeing justice, without knowing their complaints mattered. The deceased complainants. Do we know their stories? Catherine pulled up files. Dr. Elijah Monroe, black neurosurgeon, removed from business class in 2024, filed complaint. Lancaster dismissed it. Dr. Monroe had a heart attack 8 months later. Age 41. His widow is considering joining the suit on behalf of his estate. Isaiah made a note. Dr. Monroe's widow would be contacted personally, not by lawyers, by Isaiah himself. Some conversations required the human voice, not legal documents. Second deceased complainant, Maria Isabella Santos, Latina janitor, humiliated in first class in 2024. Filed complaint, dismissed. She died 3 months ago. Cancer. Her daughter is the one who told us about the complaint. The daughter wants to join the suit. Isaiah added another note. Maria Santos had saved for 3 years to buy that first-class ticket, had been destroyed by Vanessa's accusation, had spent what should have been a joyful flight to her daughter's wedding crying in humiliation. And then she died, and Vanessa had faced no consequences until today. Third, Catherine's voice softened, Sarah Blackwell. The name hit Isaiah like a punch. He looked at Naomi, saw her face go pale. Not related to us, different family. Sarah was white, actually. Married to Richard Blackwell. No relation. But Richard filed a complaint in 2023 after Harrington prevented his wife from boarding due to her wheelchair. Said she was a safety risk. They had documentation from her doctor. Didn't matter. Lancaster dismissed the complaint. Sarah died last year. Cancer. Richard is one of the complainants we've contacted. He wants to testify. Isaiah closed his eyes, opened them when the vertigo got worse. Concussion made darkness dangerous. Set up a call with Richard Blackwell. I want to hear his story directly. Catherine made a note. There's one more thing. Keisha Chambers, the whistleblower who texted you. I spoke with her. She has recordings of Lancaster telling her to bury complaints. Explicit instructions to falsify reports. That's obstruction of justice. If we turn those recordings over to FBI, Lancaster faces criminal charges beyond the civil rights violations. Then turn them over. Today. Marcus stepped away from the door, phone to his ear. He listened for 30 seconds, then interrupted the meeting. Boss, security just called. There are protesters outside the building, about 200 people. They're demanding you make a statement. Protesters, supporters actually. They saw the video. They're holding signs. Justice for Isaiah. Black lives deserve first class too. Fire racist flight crews. Media is covering it. Isaiah stood. The headache spiked. He ignored it. Walked to the window that overlooked Park Avenue. 4 stories below, the crowd had gathered. Signs visible even from this height. Faces of all colors, young and old, angry and hopeful. Naomi joined him at the window. You don't have to talk to them. Let Catherine release a statement. Isaiah watched the crowd, saw a young black woman holding a sign that read, "They dragged him but couldn't break him." Saw an older white man with a poster showing Isaiah's bloodied face from the viral video. Saw the diversity of anger at injustice. These people showed up, took time from their lives to stand on a sidewalk and demand accountability. The least I can do is acknowledge them. You have a concussion. You're supposed to be resting. I'll rest when they see that their anger matters. Isaiah took the elevator down. Marcus and 2 other security team members formed a protective triangle as they exited the building. The crowd saw Isaiah and erupted, not in violence, in vindication. These were people who'd experienced their own versions of what happened on Flight 237, been followed in stores, pulled over for driving in wrong neighborhoods, treated as suspects for existing while not white. Isaiah stepped to the edge of the crowd. Someone handed him a megaphone. He didn't plan what to say, just spoke from the exhaustion and rage and determination that had been building since TSA pulled him aside that morning. My name is Isaiah Blackwell. This morning, I was dragged off an airplane that I own. I was handcuffed, beaten, and humiliated in front of my 6-year-old daughter. And the reason was simple. The crew looked at me and decided I didn't belong in first class because I'm black. The crowd's noise rose and fell like a wave. Isaiah waited for quiet. But I'm not here because what happened to me was unique. I'm here because what happened to me happens every single day to people who don't own airlines, who can't make phone calls that ground planes, who can't hire lawyers or fire crews or change company policies. Those people file complaints that disappear. Those people suffer indignities in silence. Those people are told their experiences don't matter. Someone in the crowd shouted agreement. Others joined. Today, that changes. Today, we stop accepting discrimination as the price of travel. Today, we demand that airlines treat passengers as human beings deserving of respect, regardless of skin color. And if airlines won't do it voluntarily, we'll force them to do it through lawsuits and regulations and public pressure that makes racism too expensive to tolerate. The crowd was chanting now. Isaiah couldn't make out the words over the noise. He raised the megaphone again. 47 people filed complaints against Skyward Airlines in the past 5 years. 47 people were ignored. 3 of them are dead. They died without seeing justice, without knowing their voices mattered. I can't bring them back, but I can make sure their complaints are heard. I can make sure the people who silenced them face consequences. And I can make sure that 5 years from now, when someone files a discrimination complaint, it gets investigated instead of buried. The chanting resolved into clarity. Justice for the 47. Justice for the 47. Isaiah handed the megaphone back, turned to walk inside. A young black woman broke through the security cordon. She was crying. Marcus moved to intercept, but Isaiah waved him off. The woman spoke through tears. "Thank you. My brother was removed from a United flight 3 years ago. They said his ticket was suspicious. He's a doctor. He had every right to be there, but they dragged him off anyway, and when he complained, nothing happened. Seeing you fight back gives me hope that maybe his complaint will matter now." Isaiah felt the weight of her words. This wasn't just about Flight 237. This was about every flight, every passenger, every time someone had been treated as less than and told to accept it. "Your brother's complaint matters. Tell him to contact my legal team. We're building a case that extends beyond Skyward. If other airlines have the same problems, we're going to expose them too." The woman hugged him. Isaiah let her. Marcus looked uncomfortable. Security protocols didn't allow unauthorized contact, but some moments transcended protocols. Back inside, Isaiah made it to the elevator before his legs gave out. Marcus caught him, lowered him to the floor. "Boss, you're done. Hospital. Now." Isaiah's vision had developed tunnel effect, the edges going dark, concussion symptoms escalating. "Did I finish the statement?" "You finished it. Now let us get you medical attention before you stroke out in our lobby." The Escalade was already pulling around. Marcus and another security member carried Isaiah more than walked him to the vehicle. Naomi was waiting inside, phone pressed to her ear. She saw Isaiah and ended the call immediately. "What happened?" "Pushed too hard, body caught up. The hospital was 12 minutes away. Isaiah lost consciousness somewhere around minute 8. Came back to awareness in an emergency room bay with Dr. Patel standing over him, looking like she'd very much like to say 'I told you so,' but was too professional to actually do it. Mr. Blackwell, your bleeding has increased. Not catastrophically, but enough that we're admitting you overnight for observation." Isaiah tried to sit up. Dr. Patel pushed him back down with surprising force for someone a foot shorter. "You will lie still. You will rest. You will not make phone calls or video conferences or public statements. Your brain is bleeding. Do you understand what that means? It means that if you don't stop, you will suffer permanent damage or die, and I don't care how important your board meetings are. Dead billionaires don't run companies." The room was spinning now. Isaiah closed his eyes. That made it worse. Opened them. Focused on a ceiling tile with a water stain. "My daughter. Where's Zara?" "Still in the VIP wing with nurses. She's fine. Eating ice cream and watching cartoons. Your wife is with her. Everyone is safe except you because you're determined to work yourself into a grave." "How long do I have to stay?" "Minimum 24 hours, probably 48. We need to make sure the bleeding stops. Need to monitor for seizures, stroke, brain swelling. I have trials to prepare for, victims to contact, a company to reform. You have a skull full of blood that shouldn't be there. Everything else can wait." Dr. Patel was right. Isaiah knew she was right, but knowing didn't make it easier to accept. 47 victims deserved his attention, deserved his energy, deserved the promise that someone with power was fighting for them. But the dead couldn't fight, and if Isaiah didn't rest, he'd join Dr. Monroe and Maria Santos and Sarah Blackwell in the category of people who wanted justice but didn't live long enough to see it. "Fine, 48 hours, fine. But I need my phone. Need to make arrangements." Dr. Patel handed him his phone with the expression of someone making a deal with the devil. 1 hour of phone time. Then we sedate you if necessary. Isaiah took the phone, texted Catherine, hospitalized, observation for 48 hours, continue coordinating with FBI, contact all 47 complainants, schedule calls for when I'm released. This doesn't stop because I'm down. Catherine's response came immediately. Already in motion, Keisha Chambers' recordings delivered to FBI. Lancaster arrested at home 2 hours ago. Charged with obstruction of justice and conspiracy. He's in custody. Isaiah showed Naomi the message. She smiled for the first time since the jetway. It's happening. The system is working. For now. But systems only work when people force them to. Soon as we stop pushing, they revert to protecting the powerful. Then we don't stop pushing. Isaiah set the phone on the hospital tray beside the bed, let his eyes close despite the vertigo. Felt Naomi's hand find his, heard nurses moving in the hallway outside, heard monitors beeping with the steady rhythm that meant his heart was still working, his lungs still breathing, his body still fighting to keep him alive long enough to see this through. Somewhere in federal custody, Vanessa Whitmore was learning what happened when casual racism met actual consequences. Somewhere in a different cell, Harrington was realizing that 35 years of flying meant nothing when you authorized assault. Somewhere in a third facility, Lancaster was discovering that protecting discrimination was itself a crime. And somewhere in New York, 44 living complainants were receiving phone calls from lawyers who believed them, who took their stories seriously, who promised that this time their voices would be heard. Isaiah drifted toward unconscious, not sleep, not quite, but the gray space between awareness and darkness that concussed brains sometimes inhabited. In that space, he saw Zara's face, saw her tears when Morrison dragged him away, saw her confusion at why adults were being cruel. He'd promised her that morning that he'd make sure they never hurt anyone else again. That promise had weight now, had momentum. Had lawyers and FBI agents and federal charges and public outrage behind it. But promises made to 6-year-olds required more than legal victories. Required changing the culture that made discrimination seem normal. Required teaching a generation that dignity wasn't negotiable. Required building a world where Zara could grow up without wondering if she belonged in spaces she'd paid to access. That world didn't exist yet. But Isaiah was going to build it, one lawsuit at a time, one policy change at a time, one fired executive at a time, until the cost of racism became so high that even people who wanted to discriminate decided it wasn't worth it. His phone buzzed one last time before Dr. Patel confiscated it. Message from Theodore. Emergency board meeting concluded. All recommendations approved. Lancaster terminated. Independent monitor hired. New policies drafted. You changed this company in 12 hours, Isaiah. Now rest. Let us handle the next shift. Isaiah typed back with thumbs that felt too heavy. Not your shift. This is everyone's fight. Make sure they know that. The phone disappeared into Dr. Patel's pocket. The monitors continued their steady beeping. Naomi's hand remained in his. And outside the hospital, the world continued processing the viral video that had already become a cultural touchstone. The image of a man in a hoodie being dragged from an airplane he owned. The moment when America was forced to confront how readily it assumed black skin meant criminality. Isaiah let the darkness take him this time. Let his brain rest, let his body heal. Because the fight wasn't over. It was barely beginning, and he needed to be strong enough to see it through to the end.